Hello everybody, the Nameless Narcissist here, once again, a simple man diagnosed with MPD, giving you the facts of narcissistic personality disorder and the stuff that goes on in my head. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, but keep in mind, I'm no clinician. I can only speak my own experiences. Anyways, so, malignant narcissism. Ooh, scary, right? This is a term I think that's been sensationalized a little bit, and if I'm being honest, I have more criticisms about this construct than I have sympathies for. Mainly because if you look at the research literature, there's like almost nothing on it. The most cohesive thing is basically Kernberg's definition of it, which is a narcissist with antisocial traits, paranoid traits, and egocentric sadism, which is a working definition, sure, right? Now, and these people can subjectively suffer quite a bit. This is an extreme manifestation of narcissism, so you're going to see their level of functioning be relatively low, and if not low, a lot of internal strife. But again, there's almost no research on it. There's no research showing that this is a stable construct. There isn't any research distinguishing this from abuse, more or less, which is another issue I have. Pathologizing abuse. We have a tendency as people to, if somebody is abusive, we want to think something's wrong with them. We want something to blame. We want something to explain away the facts that this person can be so cruel. Look at every serial killer who's ever existed. People are always trying to find like, oh, what mental illness do they have? And that people usually conclude personality disorders without really considering these people are fine in most areas of their life. Just, they might kill people, right? So, there we go. If there isn't any subjective suffering, how can this be a mental disorder? It seemed Ted Bundy wasn't going through too much, right? And you can see even people who have factor 1 psychopathy, even the worst of the worst in that regard, who will do bad things, they do have subjective suffering, such as their extreme tendency for boredom and depression. But we have this weird, obsession with showing that people have to have a mental disorder in order to be abusive. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles that we have to face in terms of how we conceptualize personality disorders and mental illness in general. This is effectively just an extreme version of stigma. Not to say that, as I've said, I think that there is a correlation between abusive behavior and pathology, but that's because some of the times what causes pathology is the same thing that can cause a breakdown in moral values that would lead to abuse. That's kind of how I conceptualize it, at least. And it also depends how you define abuse, right? A form of abuse could just be a violation of the boundaries between self and other. And in that case, severe mental illness would almost inevitably lead to abuse. But I think that I think a big issue too is that the term abuse is so extreme. It's like, where is the line here between, I feel like if our definition of abuse is a violation of boundaries, I think abuse needs to be viewed more on a spectrum, because that means that basically everybody has been abusive at some period in their lives. And I think there needs to be a line. Either we need to be more stringent for how we view abuse, or there needs to be a line between basically normal, quote unquote, normal abusive behavior or just toxic behavior and what constitutes abuse. That's just my little take on it, at least. Another issue I have with malignant narcissism is, why do we have this special term that, if I'm being honest, seems sensationalized? If this is a stable construct, why are we calling it malignant narcissism instead of what it probably is, which would be a combination of narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder? I mean, it feels like we just have this term for it to make it sound scary. It almost sounds like we're trying to mythologize disorders. And if it truly does lead to a lot of personal suffering, why are we trying to sensationalize it? Why are we making it into a fairy tale villain, so to speak? This, to me, doesn't, even if NPD, even if you have somebody with NPD and ASPD, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to abuse somebody, right? Especially if early intervention happens. So to me, this term malignant narcissism only speaks to how we view mental disorders nowadays. this obsession with pathologizing abuse or toxic behaviors. Have you guys, I'm sure all of you have met people who have been abusive and have objectively had no mental illness. I'm sure you guys have just seen toxic people, quote unquote. I'm sure they may have not had mental illness. If you have never met somebody who has been abusive and didn't have a diagnosable condition, I mean, you can kind of see where I'm coming from. And I do get it, because my sister, BPD and ASPD, and that led to her having a lot of violent behaviors, very toxic behaviors. And for a long time, I was so obsessed with blaming every toxic behavior I saw on borderline personality disorder for that reason. I had this resentment towards the pathology because I was trying to protect myself from that resentment towards my sister, because it was more tolerable for me to hate the disorder instead of her. And I'm not going to say that there aren't a lot of times that you can't find comfort in understanding the pathology that not led to, like, the abusive behavior, the pathology behind the abusive behavior, and that dictated how the abusive behavior manifested, right? I think that's perfectly valid, and a lot of people can find a lot of closure in that. But at the same time, they, in my mind, they would have been abusive either way. Just the pathology just kind of painted how the abuse would happen. You can't, and not to mention, you can't be diagnosed as a malignant narcissist. There is no such construct in the DSM. Sure, maybe there's some clinicians that would diagnose somebody, right? They call them a malignant narcissist. But that only means that this is a toxic person with NPD, effectively. Or maybe somebody with NPD and ASPD. So to try to tout this construct is, I think, just damaging, especially when we don't really have the research to back it up. That's kind of my take on it, honestly. I mean, and who's to say what's a malignant narcissist or not? Maybe I'm a malignant narcissist. It would sound pretty cool if I was. That could be like a thing. It's like, man, I am a recovered malignant narcissist. Now I'm just a narcissist. I mean, I was violent before in my past. I got into fights. I engaged in behavior, especially when I was younger, with in my family unit. That would I don't want to really get into it right now, but I engaged in some violence in my family. Fairness, they deserved it. I'm joking. Nobody deserves to be physically assaulted, but I mean, a lot of it was self-defense. Or at least I may have justified it like that, who knows. A lot of people do say that people with malignant narcissism idealize the violent aspects of themselves, right? But I see that a lot even in normal people with NPD. We just rely on other people to define ourselves, and we have this innate sense of badness. And sometimes to cope with that, we are going to kind of lean in to toxic behavior. We're going to lean into being bad. And a lot of times it's even overblown how we describe it. I know that there's so many times. I lied about doing shitty things when I was a kid just to make me seem not pathetic, just make me seem important, to make people admire/fear me, to make me sound cool and more interesting. I think that's almost, I wouldn't call it a normal aspect of pathological narcissism. I think that is an aspect of pathological narcissism, or a potential one, a potential coping strategy with some of the things that narcissism puts us through. But, who knows? Maybe I'm completely off base with this. Regardless, I do cling to the fact that I don't think malignant narcissism is a helpful term. I think that there's way better ways to describe people who might fit this, archetype. One that's a little bit more separated from abusive behavior, or serial killers, or people like Jim Jones, right? Because hell, look at all cult leaders. Can you say that definitively that they're narcissists? Who knows? They may have just been sadists. They may have just been, maybe they were genuinely psychotic and thought the things that they were doing were correct. To say that definitively that these were malignant, or Hitler, a lot of people say Hitler was a narcissist. Maybe, maybe not. No clinician ever diagnosed him with anything. So who knows? Maybe. So in my mind, it's just not helpful to throw this label around. If it's outside the context of treatment, what's the point? Or the context of trying to understand an abuser, I suppose. But whatever. Just my 2 cents. I don't have any qualifications, so whatever. Hope you enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, whatever. Bye.